Wilbur Christman. This is October the 14th, 1989. We're about to go out on the lake and look how it is today and how it used to be.
What lake is this?
I think it's Greenwood Lake.
Did it used to be called Long Pond?
It was Long Pond, yes, sir. In 17, I can't remember the date now. There's a 1766, they first raised the lake. And 70 years later, they first called it Greenwood Lake.
All right, and who is our tall gentleman here?
I'm steering the boat. I'm Bill Schaefer.
Okay, Mr. Schaefer.
I'm just gonna. Doris asked me for this.
How long have you lived in Greenwood Lake?
About 20 years.
Oh, you're just a brand newcomer.
Right.
Wilbur, the next person.
Your lovely wife.
All right, Linda Sly.
I'm just along for the ride to watch out for Doris.
And that's Doris Greck.
And, well, just been a minute on Mrs. Sly. Mrs. Sly doesn't really get up at this bright hour. It is a Saturday morning at about 9 o'clock, so this must be an important occasion.
And she even has makeup on.
And who's this charming young lady?
This is Doris Greck. Mrs. Maplewood Inn, who has set this whole thing up for us.
I've lived and loved Greenwood Lake most all my life, and I just felt that we had to do something to show people what it was really like in the past.
Besides Wilbur Christman promoting this as historian, Doris Greck has been wanting to do this for so many years, and both of these people have planned this trip meticulously, and let's hope that it comes out historically as we'd like. And our last gentleman, sir.
And that's Roger Riley, who lives on the other end of the lake, Sterling Forest.
Yeah, I've been here since 1930.
Another baby.
Yeah.
Okay, but your people have been here for...
Yes, my grandfather built some of the first houses in Sterling Forest.
And so today we're going to just go around the lake.
That's right.
Yes, we are.
Phone from filthy house.
We're going to have too many up front?
No, go ahead. We'll be going slow enough not to worry about it, Wilbur.
We want this.
How much sugar?
Oh boy, and I just took it out.
No, I wouldn't, but I would drink it.
Well, the way I had it, the top one I made no difference.
That's okay.
You better remind me.
I have horse too, so
I must have given it to you. Fine community.
Yeah, I got it.
How's this for smoothness?
Hey, this is how the lake looked many, many years back, looking down the arm where we're going now. This, my finger there, is the Greenwood Park Boathouse. At one time, it was always all the way at the end of the arm. And they sold that piece of land, and Conklin Brothers slid this up on the ice in the wintertime to this location. And if you notice along here, these are little private boathouses. On the left-hand side, as we go out, these were all private homes.
Okay, do you want to see this once more?
Mr. Christman, any other comments? Or Ms. Greck, any other thing you'd like to comment on?
Just wanted you to see where
And
how it
that's
used
Chapel
to be
Island.
and what it is like right now.
Chapel Island is the straight ahead with the big bush.
Got it? All right, this is Davies, known as the Edgewater, which is now known as the Rainbow. It's always been a boarding house, and now, like all the places on the lake, they've changed from boarding houses to just restaurants and bars.
Can you give us some dates on some of these within reason? Has this been here, say, since the 20s or even earlier?
Oh, earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Earlier than the 20s.
Charlie Davy died in 19 50, he was 90 years old. He had had it all his life, so
Yeah.
that goes way back.
The family here now has been here about 35 years. The Speck family own it now. You keep going.
I am, but I want to slow it down.
Starting from here on, this used to be known as the 500 of Greenwood Lake. There were people that had seats on the stock exchange, like Caulfield. There was Mr. Shaw, he was a dealer in Persian rugs, and Mr. Hutchinson, and
Buyer for Woolworth.
he was the buyer for Woolworths.
Did the,
I didn't know that.
Did the crash, are we talking about the crash of 29?
No,
These people
no,
lost it?
no,
Or,
no, we're talking of
way back.
money,
Money
all
people.
the time, money people all
Yeah,
the time. They were no
prevailed
crashes,
when
no
that happened.
crashes here. So Moses, he owned office buildings and an insurance company on Wall Street, and they had their own stables, and they were very, very well to do. But as I say, this we always call from here on the 500. Now, can
This
you
is
go
all
a
filled
little
in.
faster?
A little
Can you
faster.
go faster, please?
Sure.
Get down.
Now-
Because I'd like him to take this.
Mr. Chrisman, I see a for sale sign here on lake property. Now, I know that's very difficult, but what would a nice place go for in 1989?
That was about 400,000. In that vicinity.
Do you take checks?
I'm not active in the business anymore, but I know it's in that area.
About 400,000.
Incidentally, these walls that you see here, this was all filled in. Probably 20, 30 feet of this all the way along. It was all filled in.
And right here was the big boathouse that
Right
we
here.
showed you a picture
Right here,
of.
on this property.
Right here was the big boathouse that we just showed you.
That was the
before.
one that was moved down the lake to this spot.
And was there a name to that again? I'm sorry.
So it was the Greenwood Park, it was the Greenwood Park
Association.
Boathouse, and they had like a dance floor upstairs in it. And it had about 5 slips in there, and the big wigs got the slips. And everybody else, tough.
Talking about big wigs, Moses, Caulfield, Hutchinson, Shaw.
You know, this house here, Doris.
This is the
Yeah.
Caulfield house right in
Right
here. It's
here.
not that anymore, but that's who it was. And Dorothy Caulfield was up here about a week ago. I was talking to her, the daughter.
And so this has been in their family for a long
Yeah,
time.
well,
Yeah, they
is
had
all
this
now.
built by the Conklin brothers in the 20s. Mr. Caulfield went to Europe while it was being built. It was supposed to be built road height, and when he came back, they put it low, and he had water in the cellar ever since.
Now, what about this
And
little
this
bridge?
is Shaw property. This was Mr. Shaw's. After he died, it was divided up into his 3 children. And the one daughter still lives there, and the rest of it, well, this has been sold off. They just don't use this piece at all. It's just gone to ruin, really. And if you look through here, Ted, when you get up here, if you look through here, you'll see the Shaw house, and you have a painting of mine up there in Goshen now. Right in here. You get up a little bit further, you'll see it in there. You have that's one of my paintings up there. That's it, right
Go
there.
faster.
No,
You want you to slow down?
we can't because it would flood.
That's it.
You know, somebody here should mention the fact of the scenery in here and the changing of the colors and the time of year and how pretty and beautiful this is.
This is just
Now this was all Hutchinson's. Right from here on, this was his greenhouse. This building right here was his greenhouse.
Now it's 2
And-
apartments.
Yep, and that next building there, he gave the 2 lots to his accountant. And a fellow by the name of Roy Wood built that home there. And these 2 decrepit-looking docks are mine over here.
We won't take a picture of those.
No.
I thought that
And
this.
this was Mr. Hutchinson's house here on the corner that we talked about.
Not just sold this.
It was a very impressive house because they had the telephone in the kitchen. for the maids to respond to the call and that. Oh, I thought it was the most elegant house I ever saw as
And
a little
Mr.
girl.
Schaefer just said it just sold for $600,000. $690,000.
Right?
In that vicinity.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That was less than that, a little less
A
than
little
that.
bit less than that? Yeah, well, that's the rumor I heard. But look at the place.
Well, I have a picture of my brother and I swimming in front of here in 1916. And this is all woods behind us. And now where we're going over where the Indians lived when they were here. All the way across here, this was where the Indians lived. And when the lake was down, why, Roger Rowley went with me one day and found an Indian axe. How about it, Roger?
Yeah, it was a real nice one.
Don't
Right
go loud.
here. Wow. They evidently camped here in the summertime, and when the weather got cold, they moved back near where the American Legion is now, because they had found things on the Legion property.
Yeah, and when they dig graves up in the cemetery, they find arrowheads.
Now, what section is this called
This
today?
is Greenwood Park here. This is Mr. Moses' home. He's dead and gone. His wife's still alive. She's about 95 years old. That's her home.
Well, that would have been a nice shot if we could have gotten that. It's too late now. He comes around again, I'd grab him.
Oh, a swan. Is it a swan or a duck?
It's a swan, I believe.
It's a
Doris.
swan.
We have the blue herons on the dock every night. Now you come to Windermere here. You see that?
Yep.
Ted? Oh.
All right, wait a few minutes.
Over here.
All right, hey, listen, wait a minute. Stop the.
Slow it down.
All right, this is the end of Waters.
Windermere.
Windermere Avenue. The end of Windermere Avenue. This street comes all the way down from the middle of the village right into the lake. And it used to be a boat stop for the ferries that ran on the lake.
Erie built these docks, I understood, way back when they first
Yeah.
started, in 1875.
You would come by train to Sterling Forest and then come down here and get off at Windermere or at any of the hotels that you wanted to.
Get your Windermere Hotel now, please. I said,
Okay.
that's over there, and you can take a shot of it.
It's
All
at
right.
the end of
See
it there.
that building right there?
Yeah.
Now, which building are we talking
This,
about?
The old
this
building,
one here,
The Brown Building?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, would you want to say that again?
That brown building that you see
Yeah.
there was the part, that's still part of the Windermere Hotel, which was one of the swanky hotels at Greenwood Lake. And that's how it looked back in the 1800s. It was run by William Wright.
It had a 9-hole golf course. It had a stable. It was very, very swanky.
And if you go in the driveway there and go around it, it's like an eighth of driveway there. It's a circular driveway, and it's like a certain, I don't know, it was an eighth of a mile or something like that. And he had racehorses, and he trained them there. And Bill Wright himself told me that they took these horses on the ice in the wintertime and raced them with the corks in their shoes. That was the sulky races.
Right out here.
And when I was, I don't know, when I first started in business, I sold off some property for him here. He had a barn, and in the barn was one of the sulkies, still one of the sulkies. And up at the other end, at Jersey Avenue, when you go down Jersey Avenue, that was Bill Wright's airport. And Joe Murchio, who lived over this way, we're going near his now, he had a plane. He used to take people up for rides. And one time they decided that they were going to have a thing commuting from here to New York City. And Captain Smith took off when the first plane landed in an apple tree, and that was the end of that. Now, do you want
Was anyone badly hurt?
Nobody was hurt, and the plane stayed there for years. How about having them take a shot of that? Because
You want
to get
the
closer.
buzzer first, don't you?
Beautiful. There he goes. He's not coming close to us.
This is a picture of the Buzzer
Bureau.
Bureau, the first newspaper.
The Bureau was the building. And
Yeah.
the Buzzer was the name of the paper, which was the first newspaper in Greenwood Lake, started in 1908. And Rady Moore and Annie Hazen ran that for years and years, and to the, what, 40s or 50s, and then they sold it to Dolly and Sal Ragone. And that newspaper kept going until the Greenwood Lake News started, and that was only a summer paper, and then they gave up.
Now, Mr. Christman, what are we shooting now?
Now we're going to turn around and go over here.
And this is where the newspaper
No,
was?
the newspaper was right up here.
Now, which building?
It's no building there, it's gone.
All right,
It's
it's
right
near-
in this area, though.
It was right in this area.
Yep.
Okay, now which side of the lake are we on?
We're on the west side now.
We're on the west shore.
Right.
Okay.
Now, you can take a shot of that right now.
Yeah.
What am I?
Why don't you
Take
let
a
me
shot of
turn
that.
it around a little bit and get it straight at it.
All right, that's the one you want to take next. We'll show you what it was. Okay. We're coming up on what was DeGraw's Willow Point, became Long Pond Inn. It was the spot where the boxers all came to. Joe Murchio had it. When he had it, he turned it upstairs of the building into a training camp, and we had all the famous fighters, Joe Louis and Ray Robinson, and on and on. I can't think of them all. Can you think of some, Doris?
Oh,
I didn't
Floyd
mention-
Patterson,
Yeah.
Tippy Larkin.
Right out of that building then.
Joe
Well,
Louis.
not out of that building.
No,
that
no,
building,
now.
that building burned many times.
This is the building here.
This is what was there. That was DeGraw's, it became Murchio's, it became Bingler's, and then Bingler named it the Long Pond Inn. And there's other building that you see here, that's DeGraw's Willow Point Hotel, and then that burned down in the 40s. And sitting there at the dock is the Queen of the Lake, the Montclair. And this little building was the ice house for DeGraw. Now, the DeGraws were early settlers here. As a matter of fact, I have a letter from their grandson, and his grandmother told him that her grandmother's family owned Tuxedo Park. Whitbeck, their name was, something to that effect. And that they
Doris,
sold...
what are we looking at the moment, just so I know? Excuse me, Mr. Christman.
Now, this is you sir, a very, very old picture. This is another picture of the same place
Right.
a little bit later. This is the place that burnt down.
And this is where the boxers were.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
yes,
that
yes,
became Long
yes.
Pond Inn later on.
I'm sorry, Mr. Christman, to interrupt your
That's
your thoughts.
okay. Well, the DeGraw family way back owned Tuxedo Park,
Go out now.
and they sold it for, I don't know, a shilling an acre or 2 shillings an acre or something like that. Okay. This was all DeGraw's property originally. In fact, back there he sold that piece to Joe Jackson. But this was all his. And back up on the hill was where the Willow Point Hotel that burned down was. We had a lot of fires here in the 20s, especially after we got the fire trucks.
They want to mention Mr. Jackson just briefly.
Oh, yes.
Just brief.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
whatever
yes.
you'd like to do.
Yeah.
His home was right back up there. And Joe Jackson was a famous clown that performed all over the world before all the crowned heads of Europe. And he never spoke a word. He did this tramp bicycle act. His son carried it on, and up to a few years ago was still performing down in South America.
They're having a reunion of the Ice Capades in San Francisco this winter, and Joe Jackson is going to be out there with his wife.
Did you go there?
Yes. Has rigor mortis set in with you, Roger?
No, I'm very comfortable.
He
you
enjoyed
are.
it.
Yeah.
There's your breezy
Now,
over
this
here,
was
right?
all Breezy Point property,
Yeah.
too, wasn't
Yep.
it? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Ted.
Oh, I noticed, my wife noticed that someone's flying the German flag. I've noticed different nationalities here. Have there been kind of people from either German or Irish background or a
Well, at
particular
one
group
time
here?
it was all German.
Oh, it
Because
was?
this was the Switzerland of America. This reminds you of
German
this.
was a Switzerland of America.
Well, that's what they called it. And Constance, of course, you know, this reminded them
Your Lake
of
Constance.
Lake Constance and the Rhine.
You're getting breezy now?
Yeah.
There you go.
Shall I go in? Is that the same house, Doris? Is this?
Yeah.
Yep. That was known as the Orange House. It was known as the Orange House way back, and that still was part of DeGraw's. And later on, DeGraw, I guess, gave it or sold it or something to his cousin, a fellow by the name of Schiffer.
Now, Wilbur, is this the same building or did this burn down too?
No, this is the same
It
building.
looks so similar.
This is the same building.
And can you kind of date this stuff a little bit? if
Well,
you
this
can,
is
Rob?
this picture is back in the 20s.
Right, just so we can, because
This was taken March the 27th, 1920.
because I'm getting a little confused between the 1890s and the 1920s
Well,
and 30s.
this goes back further, but this picture was taken in the 20s.
And this is Breezy
This-
Point.
Yes. One of the big boats parked in
The
front
Montclair
of it, the
there.
Montclair. Somebody
can
just
you-
got off the train in Sterling Forest. and stopped
Doris, can
there.
you help us a little bit, or Wilbur and so on, with the Mount Clair?
Well, that's going to come a little bit later.
DeGraw, the son of William DeGraw, didn't like the hotel business. So, but he hung around the hotel a lot, and he was a great piano player. And they had people come up that were songwriters, and many a time they had him play these songs, which he found out later on became hits. And he heard them first and played them first. They gave up the hotel business, of course, after the one burned down, and they had given this or sold this to the cousin. And they ran, they had Picnic Grove here, which is still just carries on as that.
This certainly is a perfect day to do this.
How's that?
Perfect.
It's so striking that the
Okay.
louvers are still there.
Yep, it looks exactly the same, that part of it.
Yes.
In fact, the porch is the same.
Yeah, the porch is the same too.
No, it isn't.
Well,
the
but
porch
they've
has
added
been
to the-
added on.
Yeah,
and
but
the
they're there.
inside has
If you
been
look, there it
closed,
is.
yeah.
We certainly don't want to miss
you
the
get fly in the
beautiful,
lake.
beautiful foliage today.
Well,
Green
this side
look-
you're going to have to take, Ted.
Most
because
people
the
think
one
of
on the other
Greenwood-
side of the wood, the light won't be right. You know?
Most people think of Greenwood Lake in the summer, but to come out on an October day like this is spectacular.
That's why I leave my boat in the water until November.
Now, when does the ice start forming? I know it varies from year to year.
You never know.
It really varies
Could
so
be
much.
from the end of December.
Yeah, some years the lake is not frozen until the middle of January.
But I've skated on Thanksgiving on the
Yeah,
Arm.
its weather has changed evidently.
Now, let's get a little bit of the geography. It is how long, the lake? I think is it 7 miles?
Well,
That
it
number's-
varies from 6, 7 to 9 miles long, depending on who you're talking
All
to.
right. And,
Way back, I find the history says 8 miles.
and the depth varies. Is that,
Yeah.
I know, of course, it's shallow in
40,
spots.
50 feet, some
60
spots,
feet.
close to nothing.
Now, the deepest part is supposed to be 57 feet. It's right out in here someplace.
All right. And I understand that the lake is about twice its original size from when it was called Long Pond. When was it dammed?
It was dammed first in 1766. They put a dam across the state line. It was 200 foot long and 5 foot high. And 60 years later, they put a new dam where the one is today, and they raised it. And I've read that raised it anywhere from 9 to 12 feet. That formed the arms of the lake. That created Storms Island, which had been a hill on Storms Farm. And I guess even Chapel Island you could walk to before that. Chapel Island was known as Lime Ridge. They took the lime from that and used it in the iron furnaces that were here.
All right, what about fish?
Fish, here's your fish expert
All
right
right,
here. Roger, come to
Well,
it.
Greenwood Lake has always been a famous fishing spot. I think Grover Cleveland came here to fish at the Brandon House. And there are bass, pickerel, now there are trout, there are all kinds of fish in Greenwood Lake. And it still is evidently a great fish pond.
Now, when I was
As
a kid,
if to prove our point today in October, the fishermen are here.
Yeah.
when I was a kid, there weren't any houses along here at all. There were about 2 or 3 houses before
All right, before they built this highway on the west shore, there was a little narrow dirt road that ran all along this side of the lake. And you couldn't pass two cars, very few places. It was a pretty hairy experience riding on that road, because I remember riding on it.
Now, we're saying what time, the 30s?
Oh no, when was this built? Around the middle 20s,
Yeah.
this highway. So that would be in the very early 20s. But that dirt, there's still traces of it where it runs along the back of these houses.
And the lake, the road went around the lake. You could go completely around the lake. That road didn't go until after the war.
No, that was after the railroad.
Now, you're talking
After
World
the
War
II.
World War
Yeah,
II.
World War II, yeah. Then they finished the road around, but before that, you had to always come this way.
Now, I understand because this lake is between two states that it is patrolled by the Coast Guard. Is that
Not
true?
anymore.
Not
was,
it
it
was.
used to be.
All right.
They backed out of it somehow.
Now, who does it today?
The Greenwood Lake has patrol on that takes care of the New York end. They contract with Warwick to do this part in the town, and Jersey has patrol.
We don't want to be morbid about it, but are there many accidents? Hopefully not.
Not
No,
too bad.
not for the traffic on the lake. It's very good.
Doris, would you tell us of one tragedy that I know of, because it was very recent, a few years ago, when one of the tour boats, remember with the senior citizens? Could you
Yes,
help us with
yes.
that, please?
Well, it went out of Breezy Point
Now,
down
what was
there.
it? Was it a pontoon boat?
No, no,
Oh.
it was a very high
Cruiser.
boat. It was a cruise boat. And they went down to Sterling Forest and got down there, and
And
somebody
these were senior
senior
citizens.
citizens, and somebody was in a hang glider, and they were watching. Everybody went to watch the hang glider. Went to the one side of the boat, and the boat tipped over, and there were 2 or 3 drowned. And it was a
terrible.
thing.
This
It was
would be,
terrible.
as a rough date, maybe 1985, or am I way off on that?
No,
before
80,
80, maybe.
80.
Oh, about 1980
Yeah,
then.
80, if not before. But I think one of the saddest ones that I ever heard of the drownings here on the lake, they had just finished building the Waterstone Bridge. And Schmidt, who built the bridge, he had all his men at Maplewood drinking and eating to celebrate the finishing of the bridge. And Jake Deere had a boat, a speedboat. And he insisted on taking all the men out for a ride in this boat. This one man did not want to go. He did not want to go. And they coaxed and they begged and well, he went. And the boat went out, the boat tipped over, and he drowned right off the island there. And I think it was about, a month before the body came up.
They used dynamite and
They
everything
used
else
everything,
to try to get it.
everything trying to get it. That I think was one of the
It was a
saddest.
Dodge boat, and it was designed wrong.
Yeah.
The motor was too high and it flipped over. A few houses that were along the shore, and when I was a kid, this one, next door, and that little one, they were about the only ones here.
And when you
And all
were,
this distance we just traveled from Breezy down, that was about all that was there.
a kid, well, give us a date.
And I was born in 13, so this would be in the 1920s.
So there'd only be these 3 houses,
That's
roughly.
about it,
All
yeah.
this distance.
Roger talked about the road. I read where the first road to Greenwood Lake, they cleared the last stump out in 1847. So that was the first time there was a road to Greenwood Lake. Probably came into the lower end somewhere.
Now, as you were all growing up, were there any descendants of Indians still around?
No.
They
The
were-
Indians left
once-
about 200 years ago.
I thought sometimes, there's somebody, one family may have stayed.
What's
Some of
it-
the old timers would tell you how their people mentioned them.
Was it a myth that Greenwood Lake was in the state of New Jersey at one
Greenwood
time?
Lake was in the state of Jersey at one time. New York and Jersey feuded over the state line.
That's the famous border war.
That's right. And that line went up that way somewheres.
I heard it was
The
the
whole-
Tuxedo Road.
The whole lake was in
The old
Jersey.
Tuxedo Road.
And then after many years, they settled it.
Now, can you kind of tell us where we are now? I'm
Well,
shooting
this-
down the lake.
This beach that you see ahead is now Indian Park Beach. And next to it was a tavern for many years, the Coconut Grove.
wasn't just a tavern, it was a nightclub.
Well, what happened?
Well, how about a speakeasy? Was it that, Doris?
It was
It's
that
probably
too.
that too. That burned down, what, a few years back? Well, it burned down once before.
You know, I could almost see those old flivvers and, you know, the bottles of gin and the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Flappers.
The flappers.
Well, I can remember the fire siren going off and the guys coming to the firehouse with their Model T4s and jumping out before they were stopped, and they'd bang into each other and they'd grab the fire engine as it went by.
Schaefer? I say this empty property here is where the Coconut Grove that Wilbur mentioned before was. The place that was in here burned down. Right now it's private property. It's owned by a private person.
So when was the fire, roughly, again? These are difficult.
couple
About
of years
85,
ago.
84.
Oh, that recent?
Yeah.
Oh, very recent.
And this house and this property next door, these people were some of the first ones at Greenwood Lake. This was Burtis. They came up and they had a camp here way, way, way back. And the next people are Abel. And they are here from God knows when, way back. He worked for me for a while. He told me how they came. I guess they came after 1875, after the train was running, but they'd come up and spend their weekends and summers here.
Mr. Chrisman, help us with the train a little bit. Tell us a little bit.
That's coming later.
Oh, that's coming later. Okay.
This is the other.
Lloyd's. Lloyd.
Yeah, we're coming to
Yeah. No.
That was Burtis and this is Abel.
Now this yellow house down here with all the windows, that belonged to a fellow by the name of Herb Lloyd. And it was a dance place and eating place. And he used to call it the St. Helena. And many of the local fellas like Harry Sudman used to have his band and they'd play there. And of course no alcoholic beverages were served. It was during Prohibition.
He was a vaudevillian, this guy. And he had the vaudevillians there too. He has a fireplace in there that have stones from all over the world that he collected as he went
Yes,
around.
just
Do you know whether that
He used to
fireplace is
drive-
still there?
He,
Of course it is.
Good.
he used to drive a Chevrolet, little old Chevrolet car, and when he stopped, he'd take an anchor and throw it out. He had a rope tied to it, and he'd throw the anchor out. He was trying to be a funny guy. I think Doris has a picture of him where he looks like a complete nut.
Yeah, he looks like, what, Me Worry?
Yeah.
He was the first one. He started that.
Yep.
you know,
Like in the
guy.
Mad Magazine
Right.
type of
Yeah,
person.
What Me Worry?
Now you want to take a long shot of the Continental.
That's the Continental.
Now you're coming up on the 40.
Yeah. Okay, don't get me nervous.
I'm gonna come
Buster.
face into that.
We had someone. That's a shot of the Continental from the road.
What's the year on that, Mr.
I
Chrisman?
have no idea, really.
I'd say the 30s.
And their ad always was not a country hotel, a hotel in the country. And I guess they always were sort of swanky, weren't they, Doris?
Well, now, if you wanted first-class accommodations and you'd call me and you'd say you wanted the telephones and the rooms and the bath and the everything, you know, I always recommended the New Continental because at that time, the places around the lake, they only had the bathroom down the hall and the shower down the hall. There was no, you know, no conveniences. But if you wanted to go first class, I always recommended the Continental.
What would be, this is a tough one for all three, what would be the difference in prices? We'll say, what would a room be in the, we're talking the 1920s?
We'd get room and board for $15 a week at our place.
Right, and what would the swanky Continental
Probably
charge?
25 or 30.
That'd be a big difference though, really.
Yes.
Are they still serving
That
meals?
was the old Continental. That one next to it is known as the old Continental. I don't know much more than that about it.
And well, it was owned by a concert pianist before this owner, and they had a piano in every room.
Now that certainly is Victorian. I
Yes,
don't
is
know.
it? Well,
Am I, and now today there's a private residence?
Private residence,
yes.
And the man had a piano in every room.
Yes. About, it was an attic room, and I got a very weird feeling, like spirits. My hair raised on my arms. I couldn't wait to leave the room.
That's part of the old Ferncliff. That's the Ferncliff Boathouse. We're going to show you some pictures of that now.
Now, the Ferncliff was a...
It was a hotel. It was originally put up as a man's club. And it ran that way for a few years, and then people by the name of Pitt bought it. And before 1924, one 4th of July, a year or two before that, it got struck. Not this building, but the one we're going to show you, the hotel itself got struck by lightning. And I guess the storm came up pretty fast. And if you were swimming, you had your bathing suit, and that's about all. Everybody lost everything in the fire. We had no fire truck in Greenwood Lake. We had to call Warwick. And by the time Warwick got here, the thing was right to the ground. It just went on fire all over. It was a tremendous building. It was up on those rocks that were coming upon.
I guess it is. It was.
It was a big, big building.
It had 450 rooms.
What's
And
the name of it again?
Ferncliff.
Ferncliff.
And when was the fire?
Before 1924, it was in the 20s, a couple of years before 1924, on the 4th of July.
Okay.
I have one of those brochures in my collection of that, and it tells all about it, and it shows all pictures of inside of it, and it was a very swank place.
And all that's left is the boathouse.
The boathouse, and then now they've built, the last year or two, they built this house up on the cliff. This is where the other building, look at the picture, you can see that's where it went, all up on there.
I just really, it's amazing the number of hotels in summer.
Oh,
Can we
yeah.
get that in the back?
Good thing I made a list anyway, Says good thing I made a list, at least you know what we're
Yeah,
coming.
but a lot of stuff.
It was called the Dixie. It was a long, slim boat, and that was the fastest boat, I guess, in the United States or the world at the time.
The longest and the fastest boat in the world.
Okay,
Yeah.
what, again, I've always wanted to date these things so we know
Now,
kind of
I
what
know
year
in the
we're
20s, that's
In
all I
the
can tell you. I
20s,
know
yeah.
they had it in the 20s.
A racing
And-
boat, obviously.
Yes.
And I went up to Clayton, to the museum up there in Clayton, New York, on the St. Lawrence, and they had the Dixie 2 was there, and it was built the same way as the Dixie, the original Dixie. It was long and slim.
You know, I think as a child, I remember seeing old movies of that. It was so
Yes,
famous.
It was
Yeah,
a very
right.
the
famous
newsreels and so on.
Don't they have a boat on the lake today, a big speedboat called the Dixie? Doesn't somebody have a big red
Yeah.
speedboat called Dixie?
boat. Maybe they got
I
it, but
think I've
there's
seen
no
one like that.
connection.
All right, Mr. Chrisman, what are we shooting at this moment?
Well, we'll come up on the woodlands. Another big hotel that was here for many, many years, burned down in probably, what, 60?
Yeah.
1960 it burned. Part of it, and then they saved part of it, and they finally ripped it down. That was run by James Council for many, many years, who was a hotel keeper at the lake, and he was in different spots. He ran a hotel over on Storms Island at one time. And then he ran this one. And if you search the records and whatnot, you find that the fellows that ran the hotels up the lake, one year they'd run one down here, and they seemed to swap around a lot. People by the name of Frolic and Schroeder that lived here way back. And in one of those houses was one of the post offices for Greenwood Lake. We had 4 post offices on Greenwood Lake at one time. One at Sterling Forest, one at Lakeside, this one here, and one up at the lake. And I saw a postmark from this one when I was up with Ted at his place one
Nothing I
time.
can do about that. Hold on tight.
That's why we're here at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. And,
I saw that coming. I should have warned you. When you see a speedboat go by, you're going to get a little rock.
That was in here anyway. They had a post office right here. And the mail used to come in how many times a day, Raj? You told me that one.
Twice. I don't know about over here.
I think it
on the
came
east
in
shore, it came
even
in
more than
twice.
that later on, but they got mail so many times. They
I-
bring it by boat and take it around the lake, you know.
Oh. What am I shooting now? Looks like a lighthouse.
That's Groskebauer's boathouse, and this whole area, there was 200 feet here that belonged to the Greenwood Lake Boat and Country Club. And that was a very swank club, I guess, and they had Commodores and everything else. They had all
They had
kinds
what?
Of, they ranked themselves as Commodores.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought I heard.
They had everything. They had everything from canoe races up to motorboat races. And it got to be quite a hot thing, the way they would fight with each other, these people. While we're talking about that, there's a picture of one of the fastest boats on the lake. I guess this one, in fact, before the Dixie that we spoke about. And that's Jimmy Council, who ran the Woodlands that we were just talking about. He has the fastest boat on the lake there, and that's probably in the early 1900s.
It really doesn't
before.
look much like anything, but it really, you can't always
probably
tell.
went 10 miles an hour and was the fastest boat on the lake.
And what was the era? Around
I'd say the early 1900s or late 1800s. Now, down a little further.
Okay.
We'll hit Decklemar. It's all about this vacant piece of, you ready? This vacant piece of land over here, at one time there was a restaurant there called the Old Heidelberg, run by Emil Deckelmeyer. He was practically a landmark here at
He's a
Greenwood Lake.
great restaurateur.
And he stayed there until the property was bought by Teddy Eggers, and then Deckelmeyer moved uptown. Deckelmeyer and Doris's father were good friends, or probably she can add something.
Well,
more
it
about
came from Union City. Deckelmeyer had a restaurant and a bar, or just a restaurant at that time, in Union City. And the family knew him from there. And then he came up to Greenwood Lake, and it was through him, really, that my grandmother came to Greenwood Lake in 1917. And he always sang one song, and his veins on his neck would stick out in his head when he hit all the high notes.
Was it in German or English?
No, it was in English. Once again we'll meet in the valley of the roses of
Once
gold.
again we
We'll
meet by the roses
Gotta give that
in the valley of the moon. We kissed and said goodbye. She smiled and so did I. So now you wonder why I'm lonely.
Oh, good.
I remember him singing that song on his 75th birthday when they had a party for him in the Swiss cottages.
You know, there must have been so many wonderful occasions on some of these hotels, because I know my family have been going to Greg's now for over 30 years, and we enjoy this, and it's so reminiscent of the whole lake in a sense. It's so deep in, well, what can I say? Not only history, but feelings, family feelings.
Yeah.
It's a knit, close knit.
Well, they got that crap. Ones didn't have that. The white pickets. Didn't have the white pickets.
Doris, would you kind of tell us what we're focused on now as we're coming in?
Yes, this old house is very interesting. It had a
No,
red,
we're speaking of the big White House.
the big white house there.
It's got marble columns.
Yes.
Those columns are marble. You see.
And the doors and everything are etched glass, and there's a lot of stained glass in that building. And it had a beautiful, what was the roof? Clay?
No, it was slate.
Slate, a beautiful red slate roof on it, and they took it down, but it was magnificent.
Now, what was the name of the...
It originally was, I believe it was built by a man by the name of Hoffman, and he was the head maitre d' down at Lush House restaurant in New York City. And that man was interesting because he worked himself up from potboy right on up to manager of Lush House. And then it was sold to Steiner. And then from Steiner, it went to Frank McGuire, and he's the coach down at South Carolina University for basketball. And now other people have it. I don't know who the people are who have it now.
And I
But
had
it's a beautiful old house inside. It's very German, and the chandelier in the dining room was made of deer's horns with the little lights on the end of it. Oh, it's a beautiful old house with a wine cellar.
I had a fellow call me 2 weeks ago, wanting to know where Frank McGuire lived, where his house was. He wanted to go see it.
Well, there it is.
I thought I know that.
Don't mind us. You know, it's still, these are all the old names.
Yeah, I know. Well, isn't that the borderline too of New York, New Jersey?
Yeah.
Just past it, yeah. What do you want to take the pictures first? We can do this after. All right.
You want us to talk? This is Goodwill's Castle. When was that built? Do you know?
No, I don't know when it was built. I can tell you a story about it. You can go ahead.
Well, I'll tell my story first. Maybe it's the same one. They had a fire in the castle, in the main castle. That would be this building here. They had the fire. And the firemen all came down to put the fire out. They found the wine cellar. And the fire lasted 3 days. Everybody was drunk.
Yeah, I
Remember
remember
that?
that fire. I walked across the ice. I walked across the ice to see the place burn. In fact, I got color slides of it on fire.
Oh.
And,
That
one of the
wasn't this
inside
part.
burned, but the outside was still there.
That wasn't this part, Ted. You'll see the other when we get around the corner.
Get around the corner. This is just the front part.
But if you look at these buildings, this one and the one on the back, they're all built out of little pieces of slate. And this Dr. Goodwill, he would bring people, the castle itself that you're going to see in a few minutes was fashioned after his father's castle in Germany.
Again, can we have a kind of a date on this? Are we talking the 20s
Well,
or
as
earlier?
far back as I can remember, the castle was here, so it must have been built in the very, very early 1900s or late 1800s.
Before World War I, then.
Yeah, and I can remember Dr. Goodwill. I mean, he was alive when I was, I'd say, in my 20s, he was still around. But if you lived in Germany and wanted to come over here and he knew about you, he'd bring you over. But you had to work out your passage. And he kept some of these people, they were kept like slaves. They worked for years and years and years. In fact, some of them never got away from him. I believe some of them are buried on the property up here. And there's walls and there's buildings and it's unbelievable
That's
the amount of work that they
magnificent.
did.
That's magnificent.
Now this is just this is the little building. The main building's in the back. You have to go around the corner really to get a picture of that
Look
one.
at the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
And he lights that up every night.
And all the stone that they built this place with comes from right here. In fact, the old timers called this Slate Stone Hill.
Yeah, and he made these people dig that out and carry it down, and he had gardens, and oh, it was beautiful. It was really beautiful.
The castle in the back here, and Marie O'Donnell
Owns the
owns
front.
the front part.
I sold that to them.
Yes. But the funny part of it is, Mr. Tiedemann had 10 children, and of course he was he painted churches and that was his business. He was a painter.
Look at this bridge. This is some more that was built by these slave people.
So he had to have a house big enough to house all these kids, so he bought the castle and he rebuilt it all.
That's the castle back in
And
there.
there's your castle.
So the number of rooms are, we really
Oh,
don't know.
God.
There were secret passageways and everything in it.
Now it's all apartments, but it's still owned by the Tiedemann family.
Just look at that piece of stone.
Magnificent.
If you look toward the shore, you'll see the rocks are all slate. That's why they called it Slate Stone Hill.
What is the island out there? We're waiting.
That's Fox's Island.
Are we
The big
going around
one
it?
you see.
No.
And in between Fox's Island and the shore, there was a little tiny island.
Abercrombie.
Yeah, that we called the floating island. It was full of shrubs and bushes, but if you stepped on it, you'd slowly sink down. And there was a little shack on that island where an old-timer lived for years. And during Prohibition, they said that he sold alcoholic beverages there. But after he was gone, I guess it was the state of New Jersey, they towed the island away and chopped it up. It was a hindrance to navigation.
I thought that island floated away by itself, and then they had to chop it up.
They put
They towed it
chains
out a
around.
ways and got rid of it.
Put chains around.
Now, you'll see an island, this Fox Island, that was known as Roosevelt Island.
Oh, one time,
Yes.
yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt used to come out there and fish, and he'd had his, what do they call those places where you shoot duck from? Duck
Blind.
duck blind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of the duck blind is still standing there. But, and then the natives called it Roosevelt Island for quite a while.
Well,
But now, what's it called now, Doris?
Fox
It,
Island.
it reverted
Oh,
back
yes,
to
it
back.
reverted back to Fox, but it was called Roosevelt Island because of Teddy Roosevelt.
That's Lakeside Beach now. It's used for the development that's there. But years ago, behind where the brown building is, which is the clubhouse today, was a hotel known as Lakeside Hotel. That was another one of the post offices on Greenwood Lake. Roger, what do you know about it?
well, all I know is we used to row across the lake and leave the boat at Lakeside Hotel and climb the mountain to Lake Surprise and pick huckleberries, and then we'd come down and get a cold beer at the Lakeside Hotel.
Now you really had a near beer, not real beer.
Oh, there's real beer.
Now you mentioned lake. What was the lake you just mentioned?
Lake Surprise, there's a little lake on top of this mountain.
It's beautiful. It's a
Yes.
beautiful little lake.
Belongs to the state of New Jersey now.
Yeah.
Green Acres.
They cleaned it up. It looks nice.
How do you get there?
There used to be a trail up from Lakeside Hotel. Now there are all homes there. I don't know
There must be a road, son.
if the trail is still there or not.
Well, it's part of the Appalachian too, isn't it?
Well, you could
Lake
take the
Surprise.
Appalachian Trail
Yeah,
from up
and get
above
to,
and walk down.
But can you drive up there
Oh,
now?
no.
no.
It's really in the woods.
yeah, right across the storms.
Now, what are we doing now, Christmas? Well, we're heading over towards Storm Cloud. We're on part of the lake that was made by raising the lake with these various dams.
All right, the camera is taking
A few o'clock. We're looking towards the village of Greenwood Lake. In the area we just came from. Way up there, I don't know if you can get it in your picture or not, but you can see the towers that are up on the top of Mount Peter. See them up through there? Way up there, that's the tower that's up on the top of Mount Peter.
Wilbur, where am I going? I want to go around the
I
island?
don't think you can.
Oh, okay.
Can you?
Yeah, put a shower in there. Best of all,
All right, go,
Right,
go,
I
go.
remember
Doris,
swimming on
Doris,
it.
is there another
Now
island
Now
over
there's
there?
a fight.
Is there another island over there?
There was another, yeah, that's another story.
Oh,
I have a map.
It's ahead.
We're
in this-
shooting the east shore.
Right here, I'm pointing out here in this cove. There used to be a mass of stumps. And every summer in the 1930s, there were a pair of loons that nested there. And they carried their little ones on their back. Now today, that would be impossible in Greenwood Lake. Loons are in trouble even in the North Country. But they were here at one time.
Okay, I have a map up at home, and it shows Storms Island and an island behind it.
That's right. the
And
West
I had a
Country.
man working for me one day, and we looked at that, and he said, "Gollies, I never knew there was an island here," and he lived here in Sterling Forest.
Now you've lost me. Where is this island?
Right there.
Well, it's right over this, the same thing Roger's talking about, apparently. It's these stumps that come up.
Oh, a
And
floating island.
This fellow went home and he told his grandmother that I had this picture. And she said, golly, she
You
said,
go through here, you have to be.
I can remember my mother telling me about an island that was there, and there was a terrible storm one night, and the island sank and the people in the house drowned. So apparently that's the island that comes up today. And I have a map that shows that island.
I can't get in over there because there's too
We
many
don't
stumps
No,
over
we
there.
don't want
Garage,
Just
huh?
go around.
Oh,
I have to go around.
Very
Perfect.
shallow here. You must have been here, you know.
I've been through it. It's very shallow. That's why I say I can't go over there because
No,
there's
no.
those stumps you were talking about.
Well, that's the stumps, and that's where that island is.
Yeah.
Now just try to vision along this whole strip of land here, east, north and south, there was a railroad track leading into Sterling Forest.
All right, and when was that, Doris, taken out? Very
Oh,
recently, or?
About around 1930. 31, roughly. When the railroad left, they even took the rails up. And everyone that went down, the welders would cut them a piece of rail for a souvenir.
Look at the swan here. Brazen mother, isn't she?
We are now on the east shore, am I correct?
That's
Here
right.
Between Storms Island and the East Shore.
All right, now what is the name of the island?
Storms. Go ahead.
All right, that's the one that was. That
Yeah.
floats?
No,
No,
no.
no,
That's
this is it.
That's the real island.
Yeah.
This is a picture of the hotel that was on there.
Where was the hotel, Raj?
The hotel
Wait,
was right
oh,
past the...
Roger,
Hold on a minute,
Roger,
Rod.
just
you
a
gotta look
second.
towards him
All right.
anyway.
Just a second.
Let him get this picture first. It was about where the wires run across, Raj, right?
Yeah, it was. About midway.
I had a fellow come here today. The sound isn't on, is it?
Now,
Okay,
the
Roger, now this is Storms
Island.
Island. Okay. Go ahead,
The
please.
The hotel was right about in the middle of the island. And the last owner of it was a fellow named Roxy, who was a very genial gentleman, and he was a great fisherman. Now, to get to the hotel, on the opposite shore, they had a dock and a big bell with a hammer. And if you wanted to come over to the hotel to get a drink or something to eat, you'd hit the bell with a hammer, and they'd come over and get you in a boat.
Roger, do you ever remember a bridge being across?
Here,
Yeah,
not when
because I have
came.
pictures of it,
Yeah, no.
with a bridge.
Now,
That's
I
a
see
while ago.
that we have these wires, of course, for electricity and the warning thing. That brings us to seaplanes. Are there any seaplanes or have been on
Oh,
Greenwood
yes.
Lake?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. A couple of people own seaplanes. But it's hard to take off and come down now because of all the boats in the summer, so they don't keep them on the lake too much anymore.
And there are year-round people that live here now.
I was going to say,
Oh,
how do they
yeah.
get across in the wintertime?
I don't. The only time I can't figure how they get across is when the ice ain't just
No.
Yeah.
a little bit thick. Oh, just a little
Can't quite do it.
thickness to it. I
Finished.
can't
I'm
understand that.
finished.
This fellow that spoke to me the other day, he's interested in putting the bridge back across. You know, when I told him there was a bridge there.
I have to jump in the water.
That would
Yeah, a
be
little
Good.
Please, a quarter cup.
Where was the? You want to tell him where the railroad, where the depot was?
Yeah, all right.
Well, we're not
Yes,
there
if there
yet.
was a place open on the lake here.
Now, this church, you see the
Oh.
picture of,
Would you show us that again, Doris? Because I didn't really get a long enough shot. Go ahead.
this church was on the hill up in the back. And I don't know when it was built. It was there ever since I can remember. But they took it down some years ago, and it's all gone. Wonder when that was built, that church. That's been there. When my grandfather built houses here, that church was there.
Now, what denomination was it? Do you know?
It was a
on that?
Catholic church.
Catholic church,
yeah.
right? And it just somebody took it down?
They took it down.
It was sold. I saw the church and I was interested in restoring it. And matter of fact, it was almost all set, but we had to get permission from the Passaic Diocese, and they didn't want to be bothered. But it must have been beautiful because, see, there was no Catholic church in Greenwood Lake at that time, and this was it. So everybody came by boat on Sunday morning and came here to church.
Wonderful.
Or they took the big side wheelers like the Montclair and those boats.
Now, would you mention a few of those other?
We are.
We are,
We're
okay.
talking about
I
coming
get
to
ahead of
church.
the story sometimes.
This is another shot from here.
That shot was taken from right the front of the church. And you can see the old Sterling Forest Railroad station, which was right in here.
We're almost at the state line, aren't we, Raj? Isn't that pencil?
Yeah, we're coming to the state line.
That fence is it.
That's it.
See that fence right there, Ted? That's the state line. See that fence coming down right here?
Oh, that's interesting.
That's the state line.
We are in New Jersey then.
We were in Jersey. You're in Jersey and we're in New York almost. Now, right across here, Ted, this is the dam you wanted to know about. Okay? Tell me when you're ready. Okay, this was where the first dam was built in 1766. It was the dam that was put in that was 200 foot long and 5 foot high. It was across here at this state line. And that raised this part of the lake, but it didn't do anything for that. Of course, then later on, the other dam is way down right through there. And that's where they raised it the rest, and it made all this end of the lake and the arms.
Now, we come to where the old Sterling Forest Hotel was. In the shore where you see this gray home, that's where the Sterling Forest Hotel was. It was a very busy place. There were hundreds of people. The boats would come in here. It was really a busy, busy place.
Didn't the conductor stay there too from the railroad and the firemen from the railroad and that?
No, the firemen from the railroad stayed down here a few hundred yards where the turntable was. There was a big turntable down along this shore with a little shack where the firemen and engineers stayed. The conductors stayed up on the hill right across from my house.
Now, what I'm shooting right now is where,
This is where the Sterling Forest Hotel was,
and it was on which side of the line? Was this on the New York side?
on the New York side.
Right. And the railroad went right by it.
The railroad went by and on up along the shore to the big ice house, and there it ended.
Now, another thing you want to get it. This is about the site of the rocket flight that we're on right here.
Yeah, this is the site.
This is about the site. The ramp was set up over here, and the plane was set up on that. And of course, the first one didn't go, and then 2 weeks later or something it did, and it went flying up like that, fell down on the ice,
Just crossed
and
the
then
state
just
line.
then the motor started, and it went and it, boom, and it just went right over the line.
All right, so we're almost at the very
You're
spot
right about at the spot, just about this far
This
out,
is
Roger,
it,
right?
right out in front
All
of
right.
the hotel.
where we
right
see
about
this
here.
young lady rowing maybe, and did it go over the Jersey line?
Yeah, what it did,
Yeah.
it came off the ramp and fell.
But
And
look,
then the fact is, it had come towards the people, everybody ran. And then it sat there with the motor sputtering, and it actually went in the air and went up and crashed, but it went maybe 15
right
yards,
across the
right?
line.
What was
Like
the purpose of
15
the
yards,
rocket?
Raj?
Yeah, New York to New Jersey.
Yeah.
You had a question.
What was the purpose of the rocket?
It was the first airmail rocket flight in the United States. It was first airmail liquid propelled rocket flight in the United States. They issued stamps. It was all dreamed up by a fellow by the name of Fred
Mountain Lake
Kessler.
Sim.
And John Sly, who was the mayor at the time, was a stamp collector, and he got them to have it here. And
Sure.
oh, it was a big thing. It was on radio. Bob Trout talked about it on the radio and all kinds of stuff.
Fizzled out.
What?
It was the rocket Gloria was named by Gloria Sly. She was a 5-year-old girl at the time. She was the daughter of the man that worked with Kessler on this thing. And they had a bottle of champagne. Gloria Quackenberg, Gloria Sly was the daughter of John, and she was the one that was to christen the rocket. and they had a bottle of champagne, and when they opened it, it was so cold that the champagne had frozen solid. So then they took a paper cup with snow in it, and they had a hard time getting that out of there, and some Boy Scout helped her, and that's what they christened the rocket with. So Gloria went on high school and college and became a teacher here in Greenwood Lake for many years, and we were lucky enough a couple of years ago, Doris and she and I sat down and talked about old times at Greenwood Lake.
Now, Raj, the bottom part is Mountain Lakes.
Mountain Lake's in. The Sterling Forest Hotel partially burned. I don't know what year that was, do you? And then someone else bought it and called it Mountain Lake Inn. And they did take guests for a while.
The top one is the Arlington, and the bottom one is the Milford.
Doris, can you tell us when they were running?
Roger?
Well, they ran right up almost until the railroad pulled out. And they would meet the people at the station and take them to all the hotels on the shores of Greenwood Lake.
All right. Doris, what's the top one on this
Top one
side?
is the Montclair,
Double-decker.
double-decker.
Now, the Montclair was brought up the Sterling Forest on 2 flat cars. It was launched here and taken up to Brandon Shores, Brandon Beach. They took the hull up to Brandon Beach, and there the local men built the second deck on it. Then that was decommissioned before the others. The other 2 ran after that, and it was taken over to the Willow Point and beached there, and they took the deck off of that, and they took it up on Elm Street in Greenwood Lake, and a fellow by the name of Harry Sackett made a cottage out of it, and 2 years ago, or a few years ago, it was ripped down.
And this is the Anita.
That was owned by Jacob Ryerson. The other 3 were owned by the Erie Railroad.
Now let's kind of get dates on these again. What era are we
They
talking about?
apparently, well, I have an ad in my possession. I think I got it from Roger, and it's in July the 1st or July of 1875. The Montclair start running, and the other 2 were a couple years after that, and then they ran up to the 20.
When was the Montclair beached?
Montclair?
Speak that again, Mr. Christman.
The Montclair was beached up by Willow Point Marine, and they took the top deck off, and it was taken up on Elm Street by a fellow by the name of Harry Sackett, and he made a cottage out of it.
And what was the date again, roughly?
I don't know just when that was taken there, but that cottage was on Elm Street until just a couple years ago, and they ripped it down and threw it away, which is a shame.
Doris, what is this picture of all these folks in the boat and so on?
Well, this is at Willow Point Marina, and they're boarding the Wilhelmina.
It was owned by W.C. DeGraw.
Now,
That's
those
down by Breezy Point.
those folks certainly are in the Victorian age.
Oh,
Yes,
yes, that's
oh,
the
yeah.
1800s there.
That's the 1800s.
A lot of these places had their own
Doris,
steam
would you hold that up
launches.
for just another moment or so? Now, that would be a steamboat, right?
That's a steam launch.
A steam launch.
DeGraw had one, Ten Eyck had one, various guys. They'd send these down to pick their own people up from the train. Don't really know anything about it.
Roger. These- Yeah,
Yeah.
fire.
This is what remained of Castle Tavern after the first big fire. But the owner, who was George Smits, rebuilt it, which would be the building that's here now, except they've changed it a great deal.
He was quite an artist.
Oh, yeah.
He had the
Dante's
paintings,
Inferno.
Dante's Inferno.
I'm still trying to find out what happened to those paintings.
They were paintings on velvet. They were the original paintings on velvet. Who were some of the woman with the snakes in her hair?
Medusa.
Medusa. He had a
I
Medusa
have the picture here, Ted.
Came through these paintings on velvet, and they were, I'd say how many? A dozen?
More than that.
Yeah. And as you came to the end, he had the painting of a tramp with a chicken on a spigot over an open fire and a blonde on his knee. and a
And a
bottle of
couple other
booze.
women,
Yes.
naked women alongside.
Yes, yes. It was
And
it
the
was a
hobo's
fun thing.
dream, they
That
call
was
it.
called it the hobo's dream.
All right, again, what are we dating this? In the 1920s or
30s.
No,
the
this
1930s?
This is in the 30s and
Yeah,
early
30s.
40s.
Yes. And then you went upstairs, and he played the drums to music, and he'd play a song, and then at the end of the song, you'd clap, you know, after that, and he'd hang a little sign down, would come down, it would say baloney on it.
The original building, the first one here, was built as a clubhouse for the property owners. But that was long gone before George Schmidt see it. Now this photo is a photo of when they were building the ice house. You can see all the scaffolding. The ice house was built of hollow tiles, and they were quite large.
And could you give us a date, Roger? Again, a rough.
I don't know, the railroad was here in 1880,
1875.
1875, so the ice house was built around that time.
What was the
Now
ice
we have
supply?
one
Their
more.
garage, this
Where were
would
they
be
supplying the
one
ice to?
That's that building.
Yeah, here is the original brick building that's still there. That was the engine room for all the machinery that hoisted the ice up. And that's the brick building that's still here. Of course, it don't look the same.
That's the one we just took a shot
That's
of,
right.
Roger, to begin with.
Yeah.
And your question was,
What was
William?
where was the ice going?
Where was the
The
ice
ice
going?
went all through, it went down to Jersey, Hoboken, and there they distributed all around. This picture shows the men working on the ice.
Now, they used horses and everything.
Yeah, horses were used, and I remember several times a horse would slip and fall in the water, and they weren't able to get them out. It was almost impossible, because you only have, what, about 15 minutes, and then the horse was gone. Oh, here they are pushing a huge blocks of ice in to be chopped up and hoisted up into the ice house.
So it was a major business, really.
Oh, and there was another ice house down in Jersey, just as big as this one.
Now, Wilbur also mentioned something about they had special horseshoes or special...
They used cleats, they call them, what they call corks on the horses' shoes. They screwed them in, and that let them get a grip. And the men that worked on in these ice houses, well, of course, the people from the north end of the lake up in the village would come down here. They'd have to walk all the way down, probably. A lot of them didn't have transportation. And they'd work, I understand, from sun up to sundown for $1 a day. And also, there wasn't enough people here, and the ice companies would go down to the Bowery and pick up the bums of the tramps from down there and bring them up. And they weren't dressed for this, am I right, Raj?
Yeah.
And they would wrap rags around their feet to keep warm, and they called them the rag feet. And I understand one year when they were taking ice out of the ice houses, they came upon one of the rag feet amongst the cakes of ice. He apparently fell down there and got preserved, but of course nobody knew it. They figured he just got on a railroad and went back to New York.
And then they worked all night, because when the ice was ready, they had to get it in as fast as they could. They had regular shifts, and they fed the men. They had a barracks here where they slept.
I understand they gave them liquor every day, too.
Yeah, well, that helps after all.
Help them going, keep going.
You want to tell us what this house is on the east shore?
This house here was built for the organist of St. John the Divine Church in New York City by Whitney. And it's a strange little house. It's very beautiful inside. It's done in wainscoting, and the beds are held.
Now, what's wainscoting for our young viewers?
Well, it's a piece of wood that has grooves in it. It's pretty wood.
It's an ornate trim.
Very
really.
ornate trim, yes. And the beds are hung from the ceiling With
Iron
chains.
Yeah. That,
because of snakes. At that time, it must have been loaded with rattlers and copperheads up here, which we still have a
they're
lot.
still there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but you go through the house, and now today the chains are still holding these beds
Yeah.
up. They took me through a couple of
Didn't
days
the
ago.
snake come down the chain, though?
No,
No,
the
it-
house is.
The chains are held from the ceiling,
Yeah, hang from the ceiling.
see, and underneath it's all open. They can't get up.
You know, we were talking about prices. Some of these places, you really can't put a price on them for their historic significance.
Oh,
They can't
no.
be replaced. And this
No.
seems to be certainly one of them.
Up there, where you see the little balcony, that's the music room up there, and there's a regular music library. And then downstairs is the bedrooms, and they've got a sunken marble bathtub.
Are most of the people, and that's maybe not a fair question, trying to preserve these as they get the house, or do they rip everything out, or is that not a fair question?
No, the people who have this have had it for years and
Yeah,
years and years.
they preserved
They keep
this.
it the way it was.
And they have,
Kept
you
it the
know
way
the
it was.
significance of the house.
They know the significance of the house.
From here
Got
all
these
the way up
pictures.
past where you see that sailboat, that's all owned by Sterling Forest.
And at this moment in 1989, there's a real debate on what's
Most
going
of it is anyway.
what's going to happen
I'd
with
say
this
half-
land.
Yeah, all the mountain is. That whole mountain is all Sterling.
So we may be seeing the last kind of virgin land here.
That's right.
Well, like when we were all children, this is the way this whole side of the lake looked. From like if you look here, all the way up, right to the
Yeah.
Brandon House.
Yeah.
There are no houses from
No,
here
from here
on
to the
up.
Brandon House, there was
The
nothing.
houses only started here after the war,
That's
World
right.
War II,
No, well, compromise.
up at the other end,
Yeah,
but not
nothing here, no.
There was no Forest
No,
Knolls.
no.
Busey had a tent there.
That's right.
That was all.
Yeah, they had camps, if anything. They used to rent land, you could put a camp
Camp
up.
up.
Whole Sterling Forest land. A pretty wild, beautiful tract of land.
And it's, I read something like, is it 17,000 acres or some fantastic amount of land? The largest
20,000.
oh,
Yeah, 20.
undeveloped piece as such, that's not a park, in Orange County. So it's our heritage, and let's take a picture.
I fought that fire, particular one. And the Brandon House sat there for quite a few years later, and it just wasn't used anymore. And got in real disrepair, and then I don't know what year it was. What year do you know, Doris? When it burned down? 1860s?
About 25
1960s,
years,
I mean.
about 25 years ago.
Yeah.
To be exact,
somewhere in
25 years ago. Yes.
All this property was all part of it. And around the corner they had their own dock, and they had a little building there that's where the band people used to stay, in that little building.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
I think that
Yeah,
one.
that
huh?
one, that's the famous one.
Yeah.
This is where the band used to have a little.
The band was, see those rocks sticking out a little bit right there out of the water, Ted? Well, that's where there was a dock. In fact, if you go in there, you run right over it. You know that.
I'd stay away from that.
Yeah. And that was a dock, something like the Windermere dock, and the little building sat back here. This was all the Brandon property, all the way up to the bridge. We were coming up on the Chapel Island, which was known as Lime Ridge originally. And in 1861, the Waterstones moved here, and then they brought the Brandons, who was a brother-in-law, up a year or so later. He bought all this land, including Lime Ridge, which is now Chapel Island. There was no church here, and Mrs. Waterstone was quite upset about that. And she used to hold hymnal sings in the Waterstone cottage on Sunday evenings. And she finally got the idea of a church here, and it was called the Church of the Strangers originally. It started over on the main shore, and after a year or so, why they moved out on Chapel Island and they put up the tent platform there. And, the
And
year
again, what date are we thinking of?
1861, 62, 63, along in there. And then they framed the tent platform and made a wooden building of it. And then, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years later, they added the steeple, which you saw, or I could see, I guess, in some of these pictures Doris had. The stonework was put up later. And in 1951, kids were playing in the building with fireworks, and they set it afire and it burned down. Now, the building is owned by Victor Ledborough. He's a county family judge. He built this home that you see there now. Matter of fact,
What the men are working on is a solar panel.
That's right. He just put up a greenhouse on it this year.
That part
And
of
they
it.
used to hold services out here on the water every Sunday night. Doris has a picture of that.
Pull it around.
Did you show it already? You can see the limestone. Well, it's washing away with all this boat traffic. Well, that's where the minister used to stand when he came and when the boats would all come out here and float around, and the minister and the choir would be right up here on this precipice. And they'd speak out here, and this was before electronics. And he'd just talk as loud as he could, and you'd hear him out here. My wife and I were married in this church, on this island, June the 1st, 1940. So this is sort of a dear spot in my heart for this location.
Next June will be 50 years.
That's right, it'll be 50 years next, but unfortunately, she won't be around to suffer with us, to celebrate it with me. And all these boats would be around. Of course, the wind would blow and you'd have waves, and they'd get in a canoe. There were two people in a canoe. One had a basket on the end of a bamboo stick, and they'd come out and they're trying to collect the money from you, and you're trying to put the money in the basket, and it's going like this, and they'd go around. And I tell you, everybody came here. I have seen Christians, I have seen Catholics and Protestants and Jews all here come out for these services. It didn't matter. It
They
was just
still
the
have
uniqueness of it, you know, to come here.
But they have the blessing of the
fleet here
fleet
every year
here,
now,
and
yeah.
they hold it off.
They do now?
Yeah, they do
Yes,
every
Oh, that's
year.
wonderful.
Mr. Ludmere
Every-
very
yep.
generously gives his...
Yep.
When is that done?
In June.
In June?
Yep.
Yeah, we'll let you know about it.
Now, Doris, as long as we're on this for a minute, there are other activities on the Greenwood Lake at times, are there not? In other words, I know there's certain parades of boats or something.
Used to
more,
be.
there
No,
used to be.
but
I
there
used to
used to
run
be.
the boat parades, and oh, they were fun. Where they decorate all their boats, and we'd give prizes, and that was great. That was started in the 30s. Council had the first boat parade, and then it was dropped. For a long time, it wasn't ran. Then I picked it up, oh, Jesus, 30, 40 years later.
Ted, you want to get a shot of that yellow building now? That was Waterstone's cottage. They're the ones that came here in 1861. And in part of that building, that is still the original building, the lower part, not all the way across. And there was a bar in there, and the first thing they did, they ripped the bar out. They were good Episcopalians, and they didn't like the bar there, so they ripped the bar out. And of course, then I mentioned that they were the ones that bought the Brandons here, and then this thing grew and got to be a big building, and all kinds of things happened to it over the years.
And this is what we're taking a
the
picture
top.
of now?
Yeah, this
the top
is it.
picture.
That's the boathouse next to it. It got to be known later on. First it was the Waterstone Cottage, and then it was Ikawa, and then the yellow building now. That was Waterstone's cottage. They're the ones that came here in 1861. And in part of that building, that is still the original building, the lower part, not all the way across. And there There was a bar in there, and the first thing they did, they ripped the bar out. They were good Episcopalians, and they didn't like the bar there, so they ripped the bar out. And of course, then I mentioned that they were the ones that bought the Brandons here, and then this thing grew and got to be a big building, and all kinds of things happened to it over the years.
And this is what we're taking a picture of now?
Yeah, this
The top
is it.
picture.
That's the boathouse next to it. It got to be known later on. First it was the Waterstone Cottage, and then it was Inkawa. And then when Mr. Moses bought it, and he ripped the building down, but left the original cottage there, and restored it. And it was sold a few years ago, and they added on to it again.
And Doris, you're holding up the same thing again. And is that correct?
A little different. There's
Yeah,
still
different view of it.
Inkawa.
But this is the same place.
Waterstone Cottage.
Right, I can't see
Yep.
that.
Yeah, I'm
Waterstone
thinking I'm
Cottage.
wrong. Don't scare me
Waterstone
like that.
Cottage. We call it Inkawa. It
All
wasn't
right.
Inkawa quite then.
Yes. But you know, the
But
Waterstone...
this is what was here.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
Right.
Waterstone family were a very active family in the community. She was a school teacher, was she not?
Yeah.
Up on Old Dutch Hollow Road. And
She
And
gave the first books and created the Greenwood Lake Library.
yes.
700 books she donated, and they started the library in Greenwood Lake.
Now, one thing more, I'd like to come back to Chapel Island. In the wintertime,
Wait a minute.
one thing I'd like to say that they only had services here at Chapel Island in the summertime. In the winter, when did they move? Around the 1st of October, they moved into town, into the Church of the Good Shepherd on the corner of town. And then they would have the services there for the winter. And of course, at that time, most everybody was Episcopalian. There were hardly any Catholics or any other religion. So it was a community house. They had a basketball court, and they would show movies there, and they would have all the meetings and everything at the Episcopal Church in the morning.
You didn't have any choice. You went to that church or you didn't go.
Except in the summer, you could go
Well,
to
in the winter,
Our
you're
Lady
talking
of the
about the
Lake.
winter.
Yeah, the winter that was there.
All right, Mrs. Sly, you've been around the lake so far. Any comments you'd like to make?
Oh, yeah, well, I enjoy it very much. I'm just sitting here listening to all the information, and I enjoy also the leaves turning and everything.
You know,
Very pleasant.
although you have the sunglasses on your head and you're dressed in a modern outfit, I can almost picture someone doing this in the Victorian age and enjoying it as much as we're all enjoying it today. Mr. Schaefer, would you like, as the Commodore of this vessel, any comment you'd like to make?
It was a learning experience for me.
And
I
you have-
learned a lot.
And you certainly have done an excellent job. Now, we're
Thank
not done.
But what I like about it also is when I come out here this time of year, you look at these trees are beautiful. They're absolutely gorgeous, and I enjoy the scenery. I'll come out here during the summertime and just float out there and stay out there for hours. Doris knows that.
And we just saw someone and we weren't able to get a shot all by themselves reading a book in a
Right.
boat, just enjoying the beautiful lake.
Relaxing.
Later on. This property went all the way
We're going to get a
down.
shaking going on here.
It's coming now.
All right, would you tell us about this, Doris?
Well, this is
Or-
the home. This was the home of W.H. Agricola. He was a real estate man, and he owned an awful lot of land down there in Sterling Forest. He developed I guess most of it, didn't he, Roger?
Yeah, he was the big landowner.
Yeah. And this was his home, and it was beautiful with flowers and everything else. And Ted, this is one that you have up in your office right now. It's one of my paintings. It was just a private home, and run down here with had stone entranceways there. Had his own boathouse here. It was really a beautiful, beautiful place. Today it still has the tower there. Incidentally, it was on fire many years ago, and the firemen put it out, and somebody put it on, and they come back and they put it out 3 times in one day. They reset it, trying to get rid of it, but the firemen put it out, so that's why it's still there today. It's a miracle that there's anything left of it.
Mr. Chrisman, as a historian and painter, how many of these paintings have you done of the old places?
About 35 of them. I think you have 35 of them up in your place right now, and I've made a few others. I've given a few of them away.
Well, what a wonderful way to record Greenwood Lake?
Well, I figured that maybe people ought to know what it looked like back then, and of course there are some postcards and things around of it, but that was pretty good.
Got lost the most important one, Grex.
No, if I say
You got to take a nice shot at Greg's going in. Don't let the battery run down.
the row cottages ahead of us.
Isn't he awful? Isn't he awful? Friends like him, I don't need no enemies, right?
Quackenbush too at one time.
I didn't know that.
You know, Adeline Miller said her aunt, maybe she was a Quackenbush.
Do you know Rita Hubbard just died? She was 102
Did she die?
years
Yeah.
old. Yeah, I should get an obituary from me and put it in the paper.
I got the daughter to come to that reunion last year, right? Roger, remember that? Roger? Remember Janet Hubbard? Yeah. She was one of the ones at our reunion. Yeah. Our folks owned the Maplewood before Doris had been. She was Mrs. Lottie Young, and then he died, and she married a fellow by the name of Hubbard. Had two daughters, and that one came to the reunion. I got that. I got Doris to get me her dress through P.E. Hall.
Yeah.
Roger, would you like to add kind of just a winding up note on your part? Anything you'd like to add?
Well, all I can say, it was a very, very pleasant day
Oh, I know.
with nice people. That helps.
You know,
And a tremendous amount of information all of you are supplying, I must say.
Well,
I'm not.
I guess we
It's
all did the
excellent.
best we could.
Excellent.
I'm going to have to push that away from the door when I go to Dr. Goldberg.
Boy, a lot of boats or something like that.
Doris, can you tell us about this paddle wheeler down here?
It was an old Budweiser advertising boat. Budweiser used it for advertising, American Eagle. There were 4 of them built, and they had them all over the country.
And how long has this one been on Greenwood Lake, roughly?
Oh, good 15 years, I'd say.
15 years.
15 years, yeah.
And it's privately owned.
It's privately owned. Drinking. Gets his load on. Yeah. Now, do you still have film? Right here is this picture. Got it? Huh?
Go ahead, Mr. Gregg. Anything you want to add to this?
Well, you see the Arlington is sinking.
They're building the new bridge.
Then they're building the new bridge.
And they tore that boat up, and we ended up with a load of it in our backyard. And we had the steering wheel, which was in my brother's store, and after he died, somebody took it. For next year, and then sold the one we didn't do it.
He's getting up the stuff for the.
Beautiful.
A lot different from the first time, remember?
Yeah, well done.
Okay. Somebody's got to go first.
No, I can't walk yet. I have to stand for a while. Isn't that awful?
Well, I'll get off.
Thank you.
My
It was a
pleasure.
Nice ride.
Very nice.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you very much.
You're nasty. Bill, come on up and have lunch with us.
Mr. Schaefer, on behalf of the county, I'd like to thank you for providing your boat today.
Hey, it was my pleasure.
Thank
really.
you.
Definitely my.
Known as the Bristol.
Now, who's Jocko?
He's the crow, the famous crow that could speak 25 words. He juggled, he played ping pong.
Right there,
Wait! That's the Bristol.
That's the Bristol. Got it in the shade.
All right, I mean, Doris, will you tell us where we are? Because we just had to do some changes
Well, we're
here.
in the east arm of the lake, in the cove,
And we had to take the top off of this pontoon boat
to
to
get
cross.
underneath the bridge.
And now we're...
Now we're going down the east arm,
And-
the end.
All right, could you tell us about this place that we're now going to photograph?
Well, I can remember when a fellow by the name of Henry Erb had it when we first came here to Greenwood Lake. And then later on, a fellow by the name of Youngwing had it. And then he,
Oh, now where are we located?
well, we just came onto the Waterstone Bridge.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now, where's that building, though? 'Cause
The
I-
building is right behind us. It's
Okay.
called the Bridge Inn today.
Okay, I'm sorry, Will. We were
That's
trying to get
okay.
ourselves organized. And that was...
And then after Youngwing, then it was sold to Bob Corner, who had the crow that we talked about a couple of minutes
Now,
ago.
this is where the crow was.
That's right. That's where he. Well, I guess he was there more or less when he retired. But, before that, they rented here, and then they finally they settled here year round.
You're making a profit.
And Mr. Connor's daughter still lives here. Well,
Now, this is called what, Wilbur?
well, it was a private home. We almost bought it. My dad was going to buy it in 1917, but he just didn't live that long. We had a home up the road from there.
It's called the Alcove.
And today it's called the Alcove. It belonged to a fellow by the name of Ed Forbes for years and years and years, and he ran it as the Golden Pheasant. Am I right, Doris?
Yes.
And, well, then it was owned by, what, Bertiska?
The Tisca owned it for a long time, and then many owners. after
Several
that.
different owners, and they've all run it as a restaurant. Today it's known as the Alcove.
And then next door to
Yep.
there
Next
is
door.
Sudman's.
This one, I don't know whether you get that or not.
It's going to be very difficult, but we will try. And Doris, what is the name of this place that we're...
This was
Where was-
Sudman's.
Sudman's.
All right, Wilbur, you want to keep your pen right on that.
Okay, I'm trying to.
Sudman's.
And this, too, was a restaurant hotel?
It was a
Well,
hotel.
they were all old boarding houses. They weren't restaurant
Right.
hotels. They're
That
restaurants
was a-
today.
That was a private home when I was a kid, and they had a pathway leading to the lake. And from the time flowers would first come out in the spring till right to frost, there was always constantly new flowers coming up, new flowers coming up. And also, if you look at the building in the rear, I don't know whether you get a shot of that or not, Ted.
All right, now, what am I looking at?
That, you see the one with the red roof? You See
Right.
the one next to it?
Yes?
Well, that was
The one next to it is the one we really want.
Well, Mrs. Sudman had that built, and it was up on top of the hill. And I worked there one summer as a dishwasher. And her customers were getting older, and they complained about running up and down the hill. And the next year, she had it moved down, and they moved that thing down with horses and whatnot. They didn't have any modern equipment. And she was worried about what she had to move, and they told her, don't move a dish or anything. And they brought that thing down
The
the hill
house?
like that, from the top of the hill right down to where it is today.
All right.
That was in 1930s that happened.
And as Doris reminded me, is that they were really boarding houses.
They were
They were
that was a
boarding-
boarding
that's
house.
right.
You see, people didn't make one-day trips. People came up here and stayed
Stayed.
at least a week,
Yep.
or a month, or for the whole
Season,
summer.
right.
I mean, you couldn't come up here and just spend the day. It was too far from the city. You had too many flats on the way up.
That was people by the name of Cordell who owned that house when it was a private home. They were related in some way to the Brandons and the Waterstones, whom we talked about before. It was all private homes. There wasn't any
There, no.
eating places or anything
No.
like that. And over on the other side of the lake, if you swing around over there, you see the white house with the gray roof. Well, right next to that was an ice house. Because there was many ice houses. This was a small one. And they'd cut the ice out of this part of the lake and take it up and put it in these various ice houses. And one fellow would help the other fill the house up. And I can remember being out here with my mother and brother when there was an eclipse of the sun. And the men were working on the ice, and we went out here and we had taken glass and smoked it beforehand so we wouldn't ruin our eyes.
Now we're talking about grass, right? Okay,
And,
the terms change.
And we watched that thing, and it got so cold. The men all stopped what they were doing naturally and watched this. I mean, you don't see that many in a lifetime. And you can't believe when that sun went under how cold it got.
All right, now where would be the ice house from what
The
we're
ice
shooting
house
now?
was right over. You see that roof up and going down like that with the boat with the brown cover?
See the boat with the brown cover?
Read the boat with the
Oh,
brown cover?
right.
You see the next house?
Which way?
That way, up the lake.
Right.
That was where the ice house was, right there. And they'd pull the ice up the chute with an old Model T Ford. That Model T Ford would go back and forth all day long, pulling that ice up there. And we loved it as kids because when they cut the ice and it froze over again, if there was snow on the rest of the lake, we didn't care. We had a nice skating rink there.
You won't even move.
I went to war.
He's still not moving. He's still not
I know.
moving.
The lake is just filled with this green stuff. Any comments could be done? I mean, it's 1989. Any comments?
Yes, all we have to do is to lower the lake about 7 feet every 2 or 3 years, and you wouldn't have it anymore because the weeds would be frozen. Of course,
Wilbur?
the Army engineers, they're going to come in now. I hear this talk, they're going to come in and dredge it, which is going to be a big help.
Well, they called me, and they're supposed to be coming up to see me, but I think they're interested in the Indian location. But they are talking about doing something to it. Hopefully, if we could ever get the thing cleaned out of all the muck, this would be the thing. And they could dig this mud out and sell it. I mean,
It's rich.
It's good.
Really
Oh,
is.
yes.
It's good soil. It could be
Many
mixed with
lakes
something
do
else.
that.
Got lots of sounds anyway.
Actually,
So, Doris, where are we headed now?
Right over here. We're headed to was a hotel over there, Ted.
All right, we'll take a shot as we're moving.
They're called Grand View Hotel. It was originally operated by George Tenike, who was a brother of Co Tenike.
And again, a date roughly on this.
Well,
Mr. Christman.
this must go back to the 1800s. It has to go back to the 1800s when it was built, probably in the 1890s or somewhere along in there.
I missed it.
And then later on, it was run by the Rathners. They rented it out and called it the Vindabona.
Yeah, that was right here.
That was right where that
All right, help
white
me
dock
out
is,
again.
right up in there.
Which dock now?
That one, the white one with the red
Oh,
rubber on it. It was right there. When I was a youngster, I only lived around the corner. They had their own barn, their own horses there. They had a pony, which I was allowed to come down and take out for them because nobody seemed to rent it out, and I used to have the fun of playing with him. One night, many years, I don't know how old I was, they had movies at the parish house, which was the Episcopal Church up here, and I went there and I walked back down, and Margaret Connor was walking there, and we parted at over here, what we call the boat landing. I came home, went up to bed, had a cup of cocoa, went to bed, and the next thing my mother's waking me up. Get up, get up. The Grand View is on fire. Well, we came down. No, we didn't come down because we went out, and all through the hole over our house we saw a piece of 2x4 float right over our house from the heat. And she and I took rake and we worked on the roofs around us, and there were 5 other buildings caught fire. The firemen came and they threw the suction hose in the lake here, and they sucked the whole hose full of ice. So they had to take the fire truck, go back to the firehouse and chop the ice out of the hose. And by the time they came back, it was gone. And my mother and I remember we walked down at that time, the tower, we saw that fall down, this tower that was on it. And she looked in there, and all she could see was this terrible fire, and she said, that was what hell must look like. It was some experience, but it went down in 15, 20 minutes, I think. Somebody set it on fire.
boy.
Next, we're going to go up where all those boats are sticking out up there. Of course, from here on up was Ten Eyck's farm. And he raised cattle, he had horses, he had the hotel here, which we're not going to see, because it's back off on the other side of the road, but Ted could take a picture of it. And he was the local constable. He was a great big man, and he had quite a reputation.
Had his boat, and it used to go through the swinging bridge down there and down to Sterling Forest.
What's what?
Yeah, we're going to be discussing the
We're
swinging
talking
bridge a
about
little later,
We're
I
going to
think.
talk about the swinging bridge.
And somebody got mad at him, and the boat was at the end of this dock, not where it is now. They've extended it. But his boat was at the end of the dock, and when I was a youngster, we could see it laying there.
This is under the water, of
Somebody
course.
drilled a hole in it and sunk it up here. That was the Carrie T. It was named for his daughter.
So how many passengers might that have carried?
Probably 30 or 40. Was it? It was
Oh,
something.
a little boat.
Was it? You know.
And that's right where I'm focusing now, at the end of the lake here.
Yeah.
When you get talking about the Waterstone Bridge later on, I'll
Sure,
tell
but
you.
we have a better shot. What is that?
That's I guess it's TV reception, and it's a microwave tower where they send the power on.
All right. Now, I was confused.
station.
I thought that was the fire tower.
No,
I'm wrong then.
No.
All right, well, then I mislabeled it earlier. Now we're bringing the camera down to this road. Doris, you want to help us out?
Yeah, we go around. Let Bill go out a little further, and you'll see the upper bridge, which was called. Let's see. That was Waterstone Bridge down there, and this is the Minturn Bridge.
Minturn Bridge.
This bridge up here, it's gone now. They ripped it out last year and built a new one. But the other bridge was dedicated to John C. Minturn, our first mayor of Greenwood Lake. Of course, they put a nice, modern, wide bridge up there now.
Be nice to have a historic marker there sometime.
They took it away from it. There was one on it, and it's disappeared. So I guess somebody took that when they ripped the bridge down. There was a marker on each bridge. They had dedication ceremonies and all when they put them on years ago. That's the new modern bridge. But that was known for years and years as the Linden Bridge.
From the Linden House that
Yes.
was up
Yeah,
here.
now-
To the left is the Linden
Oh, you don't
House.
have to go.
And in 1917, my grandmother leased the Linden House for 3 years. She came up here through Emil Deckelmeyer from Union City, as we mentioned before.
And this is when your family first moved
yes,
up here.
1917. And it was before the Christmans moved in, I hope
You're
you'll
16,
notice.
dear.
You said
16.
19
But
before.
anyway,
steady.
Doris,
Oh, all right.
your mother at first really didn't want to live here. Is that correct?
Yes,
Is that
my
straight?
mother didn't care for it, but this is many years later.
And then she kind of grew on
It
her.
grew on her, it certainly did.
Oh,
So anyway, 1917, they leased the Linden House for 3 years. The first year, a kid got polio, and she was quarantined for July and August, which is the prime season. The following year, my cousin almost drowned in the lake. So the third year, when the lease ran up, she wouldn't take it anymore. She said it was a hard luck house. And then she went from there to Ten Eyck's over here. And she was there from 1920. She stayed there for about 5 years. And
Now-
then moved to the Maplewood in 1925.
The Linden House lasted. It too burned, but
It
wasn't that
too
very,
burned.
very recently?
Yeah,
the
that
last,
wasn't
Yeah,
20 years.
about 20 years or
Yeah,
less?
Yeah, about
15 years
20,
ago.
15, 20 years ago, yeah.
Well, you know, the Linden House, when Doris mentions that, I have an ad from back in the 1870s, and the ad says no malaria for the Linden House. And the year before, they had malaria and had to shut down. And then the ad the next year said no malaria.
All right, from where we're
Well, now
shooting.
Doris tells about this. That must have been a hard luck
Yeah.
place.
Oh, really? Is there anywhere we can shoot it from right now? Because I have the
No.
camera on the
No,
bridge,
no.
but it was up to the left of the bridge.
Up to the left, yeah.
Right. And very, very famous. The Linden House was here when we were first married.
Yeah,
So
and
tell
we
us
went
about
with
it.
Mom, with your mother, Mrs. Sly, and they had a violin player, and he could play all the German songs and Viennese songs and all. You just ask him what to play, and he'll play it. You know, made me feel very much at home since I come from Germany.
And I remember people going around the piano
Yes,
and singing, and very, very nice.
yeah, it was very nice.
As Doris had said earlier, Greenwood Lake has been taking a picture. I'm taking a picture. It looks like a lot of pond scum here. Mr. Crispin, tell us about this.
Well, when I was a youngster, the Conkle brothers, who built a lot of houses, came up here about that time, and they owned a home over here. And we used to come over and swim right over in here. It was all gravel bottom. You could walk out, and it was just beautiful. And we would swim from there over here to Ten Ikes Pier. It was just great, and you can see what's happened today with all the weeds and the mess. It's just terrible. You can hardly get a boat through it, and you could never swim in there now.
Will somebody tell me why the rest of them haven't turned white?
Maybe they're males and these are females, or vice versa.
Well, actually, we're right on top of him. We better turn.
You get out of my way.
This way they go.
You know what? What a shot.
Smile pretty. Smile pretty.
Yeah.
Something.
Beautiful. They're beautiful.
Look at that dog.
Yeah. Then if he had gotten something, the others would have come, wouldn't they? Well, he has eyes.
Be the male.
Look at that.
Well, boy, what a chance.
They just fly as far as necessary.
Something a hard job they have getting off.
They don't seem to get the.
And what time
What a kiss his heart.
This bridge was a swing bridge way back. It was a pier in the middle, and it would turn around. We were up there by Ten Ikes, and Code Ten Ike had that boat to carry tea, and he'd come through, go down to pick up his people at the station. They'd bring a horse down and turn it around. And then hopefully they'd close it again before they left. And when he came back up the lake, he would peep his horn, his whistle, and tell them how many he had on board, and they'd set up for that many. They send the horse down again and open the thing. And I understand, pardon me, many times they didn't close it up, so if you came along, you had to be awful careful, or you're allowed to end up in the lake. I got one thing other to tell you. I was going to school one morning, and two cars were coming along, and the bridge wasn't really wide enough for two cars. Young Code Ten Ike was driving one, and I don't know who was driving the other, and they hit, and they were stuck in the middle of the bridge. And somebody sent up the Code Senior. He came down, and he gave him, and he says, "What the hell are you doing?" And he took and grabbed the hold of one car, picked it up, and lifted it over a little, and the other one, he says, "Now get the hell out of here."
How long has this bridge been here, roughly? Since the 30s?
The swing bridge, we opened, and the carry tea ready to come through, and over on the side where my hand, this hand is, you'll see the Maplewood Inn, which probably at that time was known as Row Cottage.
And what would be the date of this again?
There's
This
the
has to. This
Maplewood
is
there.
before 1920. No, this isn't. That's back in the 1800s.
Yeah, early.
That's early 1800s, or late 1800s, or early 1900s.
Yeah.
All right, now let me get another one. This one next, I think, Doris. Yeah, because this.
Yeah, this
well,
is newer.
Yeah, let me take this one. And,
Yeah,
well, it
whatever,
doesn't matter
whatever.
really. How's that, Ted?
What do we have here now?
Now, this is a picture of the Maplewood Inn, and it's before 1924. And how I know it's before 1924 is because the ice house that's there had the second story on. And that burned down in 1923, and that caused the men to get together and form a fire company in 1923. 14 men got together the night after the fire, and they formed the fire company. So this is definitely before. This had to be in 1923 or before.
In the first photograph, did we identify the boat in it? I'm not
Yes,
sure.
that was
Yes,
the
he
Carrie
said they
T.
said
Fine,
that
I
was
wanted to
the
make
Carrie
sure.
T.
Now we have a third picture coming
Right,
up.
now we have this one. And again, this shows the swing bridge. It's hard to tell the year of this one, okay? Now this shows the Maplewood Inn and the swing bridge. Now, after the Carrie T was sunk, somebody drilled a hole in her and sunk her up there. There wasn't really any reason to open the bridge anymore, and they ended up by putting planks down all over it. I guess the original part had gone bad, and it didn't swing anymore. But we still call it the swing bridge, and you can still see the pier in the middle of it.
Okay. Now, Breck family came here in 1925. We've been here 64 years. Before we had it, people by the name of Hubbard had it. And they had it for 25 years before that. And it was always run as an old-fashioned rooming house, you know, room and board. You had 3 meals a day. Before Hubbard's, another family had it for 25 years. I don't know their name. But the building itself is at least 140 years old. The barn in the back of the building has all wooden pegs. That's about all I can say. You got something?
Well, of course, way back, this land was up a lot more, and they dug it out, a lot of it. One picture shows another building back over past where the ice house is, we're going to see in a few minutes. Neither Doris or I know what that is, but I have a feeling that might have, it probably was something for their horses or wagons or something like that.
Yeah.
It was the Rowe Cottage way back, and I understand also people by the name of Quackenbush ran it at one time. Of course, Doris and I don't know the dates of this at all.
And the original deed was Caldwell.
Yeah, Caldwell owned most of the north end of Greenwood Lake. He owned this, he owned upward 10 acres.
Caldwell's from the eastern end of the county, too. Maybe
I don't know.
relative.
Solomon Caldwell, this was. And he owned all of this land. He owned all around
So
here.
how many boarders, as boarders in the early days, might
Oh, in
have
the early
accommodated?
days, you could accommodate 100 people.
Looking at the ice house of the original Maplewood Inn, and you see it has a flat roof on it. Well, the reason it has that, in 1923, there was a wooden part above it, a story above it, and that burned down.
There was a whole story about
There was a whole story above it, and that burned down. And what they did, they set up a bucket brigade from here to the lake. Drake Deer came across and knocked a hole in the ice, and he and his wife and a whole bunch of other people all had buckets, and they fought this and saved the surrounding buildings. But of course, that burned off. And the next night they had the meeting and started the fire company. Now, Ted, if you zoom in on these tools that are hanging on this ice house are from the ice house down in Sterling Forest where we were before when Roger Rowley was talking about them. And the farthest thing along there's that red one with the white hook. That's with the thing they hooked the ice and pulled it in with. The second one this way, it's sort of gray with red handles. This they would put the ice, they would mark it like you would if you were making a bunch of fudge and how you mark your pan off. Well, they'd mark the ice off that way, then take these things over and cut down that much into the ice. After they did that, then somebody would take the third item this way, and that's a saw.
That's the saw.
And they would stand there sometimes all day long. I understand they would get $1 a day for sawing the ice all the time.
And what were the people who were called, what were they?
Well, then they had rag feet too. Yes, they were working on it. And later on, they motorized some of these. They took some of these same saws and hooked the motor up to them and motorized them. Now, the last one this way is also a marker, and I guess that's the one that maybe they marked it first with that, got down a little ways, then cut it with the other one. And of course, these things were pulled by horses. They didn't have any, way back when they started this, they didn't have any machines that they could take out there. And that's what they used for that. And cut these great big fields of ice and loaded those ice houses that were 100 by 200 feet or something in length.
Ice from melting all summer.
They put sawdust between the layers of the ice. And they do that even in these little ice houses. And there were several ice houses around this area. And they'd pack the sawdust between it. Of course, when you got the ice in the summertime, you had to wash it off or it would clog up your ice boxes.
Now, Mr. Christman, you remember them doing all this?
Oh yes, I remember them doing it. I can see them. They cut ice out here in the arm and
When did all this
took
kind
it by sleigh up to the ice houses, horse and sleigh.
When did all this rather end?
Well, when the refrigerators got popular in the 20s.
In the mid-20s, would
That's
you say?
when that ended the ice business. Of course, they weren't very efficient. An ice box wasn't very efficient. I mean, you kept it cool, but it didn't keep it cold. And if the iceman didn't come at the right time, well, your milk went bad and everything else. It's been a great day that we've had here on Greenwood Lake, going around and try to show the people what Greenwood Lake was before and what it looks like now. I know that we've covered a lot of things and we've tried to answer a lot of questions, but I imagine you're going to have a lot more things we didn't cover. And I have to thank everybody who participated today, especially Doris Greck, who dreamed this whole thing up and planned it, Roger Riley, Ted Sly and his wife. It's just been terrific. Bill Schaefer, who loaned his boat and did a great job as captain. It's been a great thing. It's a beautiful day, and I hope you enjoy it very, very much.
And on behalf of the county, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Christman, because if we only had more local historians that really have the depth of knowledge and the interest, what a wonderful thing to have more preservation of history as we're doing in Greenwood Lake.